what is JSON? So as we mentioned it's a JavaScript object notation. So obviously mentioning JavaScript, right? We will be thinking like, okay, it has something to do with JavaScript only. It's not capable of doing any other operations. It's only dealing, it will be only be helpful with Java. It's not like that. It has a syntax or a code backend, how the Java is also developed. That's how it have this JavaScript object notation name. But JSON is really helpful in many use cases. Okay, so over here, right, if you look at the screen, you can see a car that's in blue color and a price of $30,000, right? So how in a JSON format, right, how we are actually defining that this car? Okay, we are defining the object as car. Okay, we are defining the name as color, value as blue, name as price, value as 30,000. This is not exactly how we deal with the YAML. Over here, as I mentioned, we need to have double quotes for each values. That's mandatory. In YAML, it used to be optional, but for coming to JSON, it's mandatory. We need to follow all the normal hierarchy standards of curly braces, all the methods. That's how we defined a JSON over here. When talking about JSON, right, JSON is better for data interchange. Okay, when you look over here, right, JSON is better for data interchange, and YAML is slim and flexible. It's better for configuration. If you compare the same JSON configuration to YAML configuration, you can literally know which one is going to be easy to be written and configured, right? Over here, you need to format the structure of curly braces, double quotes. That's going to take some time. I'm not saying it's going to be hard, but that's going to take some time. But when it compared to JSON YAML, right, you could have done you could have completed it by half of the time what you've taken to write the JSON scripts. It's also follow the same object key value structures. It have arrays taking null values, booleans, integers, strings, conditions, etc. It for when coming to the backend structure, the hierarchy, right? Both YAML and JSON shares the same thing. It's all about how the how the overall template format looks like. Okay, what JSON stands for? As we mentioned, right, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is a minimal readable format for structuring data. It is used primarily to transmit data between a server and a web application, and also used for storing data. So what does this mean, right? We mentioned that YAML is used to be, a thing, a data format that used within that's really helpful within the applications. But when coming to JSON, what we are seeing is like it's used to primarily to transmit data between a server and a web application, right? What does that actually mean? So for example, when a user tries to log into an e-commerce website or something like that, any of the website, right? If a user creates a new account and he enters his name, date of birth, address, phone number, creates an account, how the browser is sharing that data to the backend server is using a JSON format. That's what it's mentioned, like it's used primarily to transfer data between the server and the web application. So that JSON format consists of a new user data, all the data what he entered, and the server can use that data, that JSON format data can be passed into the database, and database can update those entries saying that there's a new user being created. These are those data. So that's how a data being transmit from what you're seeing from the browser. How the entries happen is going to be a JSON format. That JSON format has been shared to the backend server. That server passes the data and put it all along to this backend database. Database will get all those details from the JSON and will have it update on the backend database. So it has a huge impact how the data is being served and transferred. Even if you look at on the network tabs on any of your website, right? Even if you click on your website and open the data network tab, you can see many of those .json files being loaded. It usually helps a lot between serving a content from directly from the CMS content management server. It really helps a backend applications, how it increases the user experience within the browser. It has a lot to do with transmitting data, processing data, and making it in a unique and beautiful way how it can be processed and managed. So that's where the JSON comes into place. So as we mentioned, once we have a JSON data, it can be passed and it can be used for various applications like editing the database know what changes to do. When coming to JSON, right, in our use case, we can use JSON files for CloudFormation templates. You can use JSON files to create CloudFormation templates. You can use it to create different resources. That's what we are going to do by the end of the session. But as we mentioned, YAML and JSON are the two main data format files that we are going to deal with today, and what we are going to learn. It has a huge impact of how it can impact the operations in a critical way, and how it makes the data flow and the data transmit in a very easily manner. Let's go next one. Yeah, as what we seen in YAML, right, the files extension used to have .yml or .yaml, I'm sorry. And when coming into JSON, right, the JSON file should end with .json. That's the extension. JSON is designed by Douglas Crockford in 2001. We do have this json.org website where it used to have all the information, how it started, what all operations that we can use, how it's been going. And also, as I mentioned, JSON is not only being used with JavaScript, it can be used in many other operations, many other programming languages. It's had the ability to deal with Python, Go, many other use cases.